Okay, hi everybody. This is Harvey Slogo Wasserman talking to you from LA. Is this our ninth or our 10th meeting?
And
This is our 10th meeting. We're just getting underway. The COVID-19 Emergency Election Protection Group. We are devoted to a free and fair election with a reliable vote count coming in the fall. What a concept. And we're moving as fast as we can towards that goal. So I want to say that on Wednesday, we will be doing a Facebook town hall. And it's going to be at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. You will not be, if you're not on the presenter list, you won't be able to participate until the very end. But we are going to present the trifecta, or for those of you who are religious, the trinity of election protection, which is the voter rolls, vote by mail, and a safe vote count. And it's going to be a solid hour, action-packed with Mimi Kennedy, Egberto, Andrea Miller, Bob Fitrakis, Emily Levy, and many other people. So and the reason I'm doing that, the reason we'll do that is to have a sort of a document that people can refer to that'll cover the list of critical issues in protecting the election. We're down to 4.5 months. It's very nerve-wracking, as we all know, but between protecting and re-registering the voter rolls, doing vote by mail right, and I want to say a word about that in a minute, and getting a vote count that's accurate, that's what we are aiming to lay down as clear as possible in the coming meeting. And that'll be Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and noon Pacific. So with that, we have a full agenda today, as usual. We're going to talk about, let me start with vote by mail real quickly as a generic issue. It's somewhat amusing. As you know, Donald Trump has been attacking vote by mail, even though he votes by mail, and fraudulently. He votes in Florida, but he lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, at least for another couple of months. And the media is now starting to report that because Trump is so adamant against vote by mail, a lot of Republicans won't vote by mail. And in fact, in Michigan, Trump supporters had a bonfire of registration forms for vote by mail. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking or if they're thinking, but that's the situation. And, it's happening very quickly. Jennifer Roberts, since we're on this issue, the North Carolina legislature has just passed a piece of legislation. It's amazing that legislature can pass anything, but it actually enhances vote by mail. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It went back and forth between our House and our Senate, and got ratified. So, there are a few things that Democrats gave up. It prohibits having all of the voting done by mail. But it gets a lot of wins for us. And so we still have to have one signature on an absentee ballot, but that's down from 2 signatures. So much easier for most people in a time of COVID. There are regulations about health, protective clothing for poll workers. There's going to be tracking with a barcode on ballots. It extended the period for accepting absentee ballots by 2 weeks. And it also is allowing request of an absentee ballot by email, which is huge because it was a much more difficult procedure before. So you can request those by email. And there's also an online portal they're creating to make it easier to request by email. One of the things that they somewhat conceded is the fact that we have a couple of voter ID laws that are in the courts, just in case those come, um, those get approved as saying voter ID is acceptable. This bill provides that you can also use public assistance card to be a valid form of ID, and that the Department of Motor Vehicles has to issue for free cards for non-drivers, non-operators. We're hoping that that voter ID law, right now, it's not in place. It's in the courts, but if for some reason a decision comes down, at least there's some more acceptable forms of IDs. They also have allotted additional funds to hire poll workers, knowing that it's going to be hard because a lot of elderly folks don't want to be around COVID. And let's see if there's anything. We did not get postage on the return form for the absentee ballot, unfortunately. But all in all, considering you can request by email, et cetera, and only one witness, I think it's a big win. So
Wow.
bipartisan.
It's amazing anything bipartisan got through the North Carolina legislature.
I think Republicans heard from enough elderly folks that it was starting to get really, really difficult for them to access the process, because a lot of elderly folks are very worried about the pandemic. And so, making it easier for them, I think, was a big part of that. So.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions about this bill? Like a bipartisan bill coming out of North Carolina is almost an impossibility to even think about, but how you did it. And I mean, can you give us a couple of hints on how it happened?
Well, I don't know all the back and forth that went on in the legislature. I know that it started in the House, and the Senate had a version that got sent back to the House, and they finally agreed on it. I think, again, I think that enough people are watching what's going on in Wisconsin. They got lots of emails from constituents very concerned about voter suppression. And I have to believe that a lot of older folks who are Republicans weighed in as well. I think that's the only way. I mean, the other side had to see that there was something they got out of it too, or it wouldn't have passed.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, congratulations. Or as they say in North Carolina, mazel tov. But really, really amazing. Alan Minsky from PDA, thank you very much, Jennifer. We really appreciate that. Alan Minsky from PDA, you on briefly. Is there anything you can update us on building a national network with PDA organizers?
Yes, we met with, is Mimi Kennedy? Yes, she's here, and Mimi has her hand up. And I just am a little embarrassed because I'm going to forget the last name of the great activist, Lori is her name, that Mimi and I spoke to. And, she is helping us drive our efforts to achieve what we've spoken about on the call, which is, again, we are going to not only provide through, our website and through the dissemination of the information to our supporters, the clearest information available on each state, on the deadlines, the processes, everything, what kind of machines are used, everything everybody needs to know, but to have that information be displayed as clearly as possible. And then to have, because we are a dispersed national mass membership organization, to have people in every state and hopefully every population center in every state anchor that information to help us distribute it as best we can through a strategy that will, of course, evolve distinctly across every region of the country, but to get it into local media, to disseminate it as much as possible, to get the word out that PDA has the best information, and we just have to get it out through that dispersed national process. And it's all hands on deck going forward for PDA. And all that will be available on the website. And so we'll have, each of the 50 states. The PDA website, by the way, is under reconstruction starting today and will be for about the next couple of weeks. And it'll have this as a primary feature, including the contacts in each state. And we should get that done, as Mimi has written in an article that we're going to publish in the next few days. For the November election, this starts in a full-on way by the end of July, because it really begins, the national election begins basically August 1st or August 5th, if you want to set the date.
Mimi Kennedy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was chatting with Jennifer on the side. Hi, Jennifer. Because I spaced out for a text for a moment while you were presenting. But my question was whether anything in the legislation addressed the conflict between having ordered a mail ballot and then perhaps not receiving it, going to vote in person. The reason I keep bringing this up is the more I look into this, the more I don't want any Republican lawyers to say, you didn't make them do anything about their mail ballot when they signed in and it's out there and how, blah, blah, blah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering what North Carolina might have done. What's the.
Sure. And I'm sorry, I thought you were asking about surrender ballots. We do not have surrender ballots, which is good. But part of the legislation is that absentee ballots are required to have a barcode that allows the County Board of Elections and the voter to track a voted ballot following its return to the county board. So,
right.
Yeah, so that ones that don't appear in the first place, if they don't appear before, there is not a provision. They'll have to go vote in person. And we do have curbside voting. So a voter who's afraid for health can actually drive up in their car and request someone come out to them with the ballot.
I want to be very specific
Okay.
for everybody on the call as to why I'm asking this. A surrender ballot is just the ballot you get in the mail. You just don't want to use it. So if you want to vote in person in some places to prove that you didn't vote already, you have to give it over, surrender it, exchange it for. I'm asking about a ballot whose tracking may be, well, it's at the post office. We don't know why you didn't get it, but you didn't get it. This is not, I got it, I voted it, and I went back in, and now I'm tracking, did you get it? Did my vote count? I'm saying I'm in person because I requested a mail ballot and it has not come.
Yeah, and there's no requirement for them to surrender that barcoded ballot.
You vote a regular ballot, and then do they know that you, Mimi Kennedy, I've appeared, and now they just cancel? They say if a mail ballot ever comes in for Mimi Kennedy, we're never going to accept it, right?
They're going to check. Yeah, they're going to let you vote in your precinct, and they are going to let that vote count, the in-person vote count. If something comes in later with your barcode, it would not count.
Would not count. And is that because you, North Carolina, I would have to check, have sign-ins that are not just paper? There's some contact with the county that issued the mail ballot that the poll worker can tell you didn't get it? I'm asking this question because I'm wondering how they. I am trying to prevent I'm trying to prevent any lawyer coming in later and saying, all these people voted at the polls and they voted their, you know what I'm trying to prevent. So what's the thing at the polls? Do you know what that process is? It's just. So,
when you show up to vote, the poll worker looks up your registration and your name and counts you as having voted.
Great.
And that goes into the state board of elections system. Nobody, after you do that in person and verify with your address and maybe an ID or not, because we don't know if we're going to have IDs required, but after you vote in person, no one else can use your name and your address to vote. So they are automatically updating that in the county. If there's any dispute, you can vote a provisional ballot. They check later, but they're updating that on the county computer system, in real time.
Real time.
Yeah.
You have
it's county by county.
County by county, there's a real-time dialogue on the sign-in. So that would be the only voter suppressive thing that would happen. This is so great, Jennifer. I'm excited but the only would then be to do something to interfere with that dialogue. So then it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if somebody, questioned that ballot and said you voted in the wrong county and there's someone with your exact name,
Oh,
you
sure.
would have a different address, right? So it's not gonna,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's, yeah.
Okay. Steve Rosenfeld wanted to jump in. Steve?
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to mention one or two things that I heard about from last week that affect exactly what we're talking about as states like North Carolina go forward here. So first of all, in Georgia, one of the problems that they had many problems with the return of absentee ballot applications by email, was that the county offices, this is in the Atlanta metro area, didn't have enough storage space on their computers to handle the actual return of the applications by email. So I'm mentioning this, Jennifer, because it may vary county by county in North Carolina. That, of course, was compounded by then COVID employee outages and the poll worker exodus, and the closing of locations, and not telling people in public what was what. But that was a digital technical thing. A similar thing in South Carolina happened, which was on the statewide website, you could download the application. Most people thought that if you just filled it out on the screen, you were done. Duncan Buell told me in his county, which is the capital county in South Carolina, 12,000 people, half, thought that they were done once they filled it out on the screen. They weren't done. They had to print it out and send it in. But if you had an Apple computer and you did not have Adobe on it, it would not open on your computer. So this is, so as you think about, the way this is implemented, possibly in North Carolina, there's just this stuff in the background to just think about, because this was like, nearby states. So I'll leave it there. I mean, there's so many things that went wrong in Georgia, and we can go.
What I want to do is I'm going to come back to Georgia and to you, Steve,
Yeah.
because the Georgia discussion is going to take a long time.
Yeah, but let me ask one last thing that follows up from Mimi's example to offer some clarity here, because this is little understood. So when people didn't get their absentee ballots in Georgia and they showed up, if after struggling to find a polling place, the poll worker, who has the same poll books as in LA, by the way, had to call into their local board of election and on the phone get permission to cancel that absentee ballot before allowing them to vote a regular ballot. That was an additional step that was completely unnecessary, because in other jurisdictions, they don't do that. They don't have to do that. And that was yet another thing that caused the backup. So those people got to vote regular ballots. They didn't get to vote provisional ballots, but they had to wait through that approval process, and then they had to sign an affidavit, and then they could go and vote on the new ballot marking device machines. So that's a pretty unappreciated thing in the fine print that was part of the backup there. So when Mimi's talking about what is the surrender rule, what happens if you don't get your thing in the mail because you're using an out-of-state contractor and they are a week late, what do? Here's a pretty good example of how these obstructions can be put into this process that pushes everybody back from hours and hours and hours, because they didn't have enough people at these boards of elections to answer the phones to approve these folks. So anyway, I'll stop right there. We can talk about other Georgia stuff, but this is why
we're going to come back.
Yeah,
we're going to come back to Georgia, because I want to make sure once we get into Georgia, I'm sure it's going to take a while. Steve Spitz, you are in Washington and Virginia with another U of M graduate. That makes three of us. By the way, you'll be glad to know I've refrained from reviewing Michael Moore's movie on the environment, and instead have drafted an op-ed asking him to organize Michigan for election protection and to put up his money. So anyone who's interested in seeing my draft article to Michael Moore before I send it out, please. I'm a 1967 graduate of the University of Michigan, so I have standing. But it seems to me if Michael Moore got very publicly involved in election protection in Michigan, It could really help us. Is anybody from Michigan on the phone, on the call? If you are, contact me. And anyone who wants to see the draft, I will send it to you. I'm going to put it up in a day or two. Okay, Stephen Spitz, will you start you are in Virginia, and tell us what you're doing there, please.
Thanks,
Harvey.
Harvey.
Why don't you just send it to everybody?
What?
Why don't you just send it to everybody?
All right. Well,
on the list.
We'll do that. But let's proceed now. But of course, if you didn't root for the University of Michigan to win the national championship, I can't send it to you. So you got to give me your verifiables here. Okay, Stephen, go ahead, please.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, Stephen Spitz.
All right. Well, so I am here with Kristen Cabral, and
Hi,
one of our roles is we're co-chairs of the Election Law and Voter Protection Committee for Virginia's largest jurisdiction, which is Fairfax County. And the main thing that I wanted to talk about is why vote by mail, having everybody vote by mail, is not a practical, workable solution in many states, including Virginia. Here's the problem. I just voted in a primary. The primary is June 23rd. It took 2 full weeks just to get the absentee ballot. Tomorrow is the stated legal deadline for requesting an absentee ballot. Nobody who requests an absentee ballot today or tomorrow is going to actually get the absentee ballot in time to vote, let alone have it received back. Their only solution, as we know, is to have horror stories like what happened in Milwaukee. You don't have your ballot, yet you're going to go and you have to vote on election day and wait in line, which is what we're all trying to avoid. So there are lots of other alternatives, and Kristen is going to talk about that. What I want to describe is that the average time right now is 2+ weeks in Virginia for various reasons. The slowness of the Postal Service because they've had cutbacks, the internal sorting of mail in the mail rooms of these counties. It doesn't go directly to the Office of Elections, and there's just lots of delays. Secondly, there are requirements that make it very difficult to vote by mail. There is a witness requirement. I respect that North Carolina reduced it from 2 to 1, but 1 is one too many. I live alone. Trying to get a witness for people who live alone in the middle of a pandemic is not a good idea. They do not pay for postage. So you have to go to the post office if you don't have stamps. There are all sorts of requirements that you fill out on the outside envelope when you mail in an absentee ballot, including your signature and that you have to seal it, and anything goes wrong, your ballot will not be counted. In Arlington County, they had a recent special election for a deceased supervisor, and about a quarter of those ballots were not returned in time for them to count. So there are a variety of prospective solutions which Kristen will cover. So Kristen.
Kristen, you with us?
Kristen?
Hello, Kristen?
Oh, can
Okay, you're breaking up.
you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. So hi, also from Fairfax County, Virginia, larger than 8 states by population, where over 1.1 million people, at least 750,000 voters. To make it easier to vote by mail, that is if you especially need to vote by mail, is to get rid of that witness signature, as Stephen just mentioned. Also have prepaid postage on the outer envelope. Also, to the extent you do mail it, we would like to see a rule that you can have it postmarked through Election Day and have it arrive after Election Day and still counted. Right now in Virginia, the law is that your mail-in ballot has to be received in the registrar's office by 7 p.m. on that Tuesday, Election Day. And then also, we want to encourage our voters, those who do have to vote by mail, to request their absentee ballot early because it is taking 2 to 3 to even 4 weeks to get your absentee ballot after request, either online or by hard copy application. And to the extent that we're finding already in Virginia with the May town and city elections, with the special election in Arlington, and with our upcoming U.S. House primaries in 8 days, next week's Tuesday, June 23rd, is that we're going to encourage voters who are willing to not vote by mail in November, to vote early in our satellite centers that we do have. We're going to have up to 15 satellite early voting in-person centers in Fairfax County. And to the extent you are, autoimmune compromised or too scared to go inside the poll, and to at least do your voting by curbside. Now, we're hoping we can get enough people to do that early in-person voting to bank those votes, and those votes will be cast and counted. Right now in Virginia, even though we've had a lot of voting reform out of the last General Assembly session, which was most of January, all of February, a little in March, and those new reformative laws go into effect July 1st, suddenly all the COVID issues that no one thought about before COVID, and our General Assembly was in session mainly in February, got passed over. So a whole new set of issues came about. I will mention that for the sake of those May town and city elections, the special election in Arlington, and the upcoming U.S. House primaries in 8 days, that the ACLU brought a federal suit, based on basically the equal protection provision of the 14th Amendment, down in Roanoke, Virginia, saying, look, during COVID, Virginia needs to dispense with its current witness signature requirement, which luckily is one of those reformative laws that goes away July 1st, but it still counts for these spring elections during COVID, because there's a racial disparate impact that here in Virginia, African-American voters have a high level of requesting absentee ballots, and also COVID itself is affecting African-Americans more so. And because of this racial disparate impact, Virginia should, based on the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause there in that federal suit by ACLU, get rid of its witness requirement. And that's exactly what happened based on that lawsuit. So luckily, the witness signature has gone by the wayside.
Wow, that's a big
No,
victory.
wait a second.
No, I think, Stephen, I got it. Do I have it? I have it backwards, don't I?
Yes,
Or
yes.
no?
Witness
Yeah, actually,
requirement.
it was the two, there's the 2A excuse, and I'm sorry, the 2A excuse and the witness signature. So go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, the witness signature was contested for the June 23rd primary only. And
Right,
it was
okay.
for the primary, but it's still in existence for the November general election. That hasn't changed.
That's true.
Okay, so that obviously, North Carolina got it down to 1. Maybe you can get rid of yours. I mean, the witness signature requirement is really a game killer. Stephen, there is going to be vote by mail one way or another, and we have to remember we've always had vote by mail for absentees. It's just that during the COVID situation now, we're going much deeper, which I think in the long term, we're really going to have to work with it and make it work. If you can get rid of the witness signature and popularize the urging that people get their ballots early, and if you can extend the voting period as far as possible, that's the key. Does anyone else? Stephen, do you have more? Did you want to comment on?
Yeah, I did want to comment on what you just said, Harvey. Here's the problem. Unlike a lot of these Western states, like California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Utah, where they're used to doing vote by mail, very few people vote by mail in Virginia. And the jurisdictions are not prepared for the volume. The voters are not educated on how to do it. This is going to involve a massive education problem and processing problem. If they're taking 2 to 3 weeks now in a dinky little 1 congressional district out of 3 in Fairfax County primary, there will be exponential additional absentee by mail ballots in November. And if it takes 2 to 3 weeks now, how long will it take in October and November? That's
the problem that we're going to have to deal with.
Volume and the lack of preparation.
Well, the thing is, Stephen, there are Republican primaries in the other, it's not just the Democratic primary. We do have some Republican primaries. But the thing is, we do have a special session, looks to be coming up in August, mainly to deal with criminal justice reform and policing reform. We're hoping we can get further voting reform for the November election in the special session that looks to be gaveled in August down in Richmond by our General Assembly. Sorry for misspeaking on the witness signature. That was this upcoming U.S. House primary. But we also had still before July 1st and all these spring elections. Absentee voting is still only by excuse through July 1st. And the excuse of 2A, if you have sickness or disability, our Democratic governor's Department of Elections said, even if you are not ill from COVID, but you fear getting ill from COVID, you can claim that 2A excuse of illness or disability almost in anticipation that, if you were to venture out to vote, you could get COVID, you could get sick. The Republicans challenged that. Right now, that case is pending, but there was an order saying, if anything, they ran the court too late to make that argument. So that 2A illness disability excuse, even if you're not kind of, on the record, truly medically ill or disabled, but because of the COVID, you can claim that reason.
Okay. So listen, we're going to move on. You should look, if you have a special session of the Assembly coming up, you should look at the North Carolina bill that was just passed. In North Carolina, with a very right-wing Republican legislature, they have passed more money and more facilities to do vote by mail. I mean, I know that the states all across the country have all had, except for the 5 that have been doing vote by mail, have had small percentages of people voting by mail. But this year, it will be a minimum of 40% and probably more in most states of the country. And Virginia will be one of them. So at this point, it doesn't make sense to oppose vote by mail. You need to go in, I would say, in all humility, you need to go into the special session and say, here's what we have to do to make vote by mail work.
Right,
and then
also,
on this call have been doing this.
Let me mention drop boxes. The largest jurisdiction in particular is looking for drop boxes. For quite a number of years, at least a decade ago, outside our main government center, there was a drop box for ballots. For some reason, it went away. It switched over as a drop box for tax payments, but yet still people were used to dropping ballots in there, and people would drop, still in that one drop box, drop their ballots. They would still be fished out by the tax department, given to the registrar, cast and counted. But now we're encouraging our jurisdiction that at those 14 early satellite locations where you can start voting 2 to 3 weeks before Election Day, to put those drop boxes there. So to the extent you do request get your absentee ballot on time, but you also don't have postage, you also want to make sure that that gets cast and counted, and that Trump's postmaster doesn't slow down the delivery of your mail-in absentee ballot, even if you have the postage. to put that ballot in a drop box. Our neighboring county, Montgomery County, England, has the drop boxes. A lot of Maryland jurisdictions have it. Yeah, we basically want to make curbside, particularly curbside drop boxes and curbside voting be almost like McDonald's drive-through, just like boom, boom, boom. And I think a lot of that was happening in Madison, Wisconsin during that debacle of early April of the Wisconsin presidential primary.
So these are generic issues that are going to all across the board. Virginia, of course, is an incredibly important state. And what you're facing there is a need to reform. You're not going to get rid of vote by mail. It's going to be somewhere between 40 and 80% of the voting in all states this year. There's no way around it. And I happen to think it's a good thing if we make it a good thing. So Stephen, you guys, Kristen, you guys are going in. If you're having a special session, if we can win, if the good guys can win certain reforms in North Carolina, you should be able to do it in Virginia.
Yeah, and
Virginia,
just one last thing we're thinking of, if it is taking almost a month to get your absentee ballot, to have something like a 1010 campaign, or definitely request your ballot by Indigenous Peoples Day, and 1010 meaning October 10th. You know, just have it stuck in brain that, you know, gosh, I shouldn't get beyond October 10th as like a tickler deadline to request my absentee ballot, to be able to get it in time, to be able to send it, and that it arrives on time. You know, even with a postmark or receipt, you know, on election day. And by the way, if you recall in Wisconsin, some ballots were sent back without postmarks because sometimes the postmarking machine doesn't work very well at the post office. So that's another issue. But yeah, we were thinking, you know, maybe should we have a 1010 campaign, October 10th? That's your drop dead deadline.
I like that. I think that's
requesting your absentee ballot because it's like a month turnaround.
Okay, that's a good idea. So listen, just to leave Virginia, but Stephen, you guys, it's essential that make it work. There's no opposing vote by mail at this point in time. It will be a minimum of 40%, probably in every state of the country, and much higher in most of them because of what's going on. So if you have a special session of the legislature coming up, that's a golden opportunity. Paul has posted the link to the article from the Charlotte newspaper about the piece of legislation that passed there. I think now is the time to decide how you're going to go into the legislature and ask for what you need to make this work.
All right, Harvey, I just want to say, I want to clarify that. Okay, we're not opposed to vote by mail. What we're saying is, as a practical matter, you want to encourage people who will vote by mail to vote early by mail. If they haven't voted early by mail, there are other alternatives that are more practical, like curbside voting, early voting. We want to try to avoid the situation that happened in so many places, that is, where people wait until the official deadline to request their absentee ballot, don't get it in time, and then are forced to vote and wait in long lines on election day, which is the worst thing that we're trying to prevent.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And you in Virginia do not have the kind of legislatures that we have in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, and so on. So you have a real opportunity in Michigan in Wisconsin, I'll get it, Virginia, to really shape the upcoming election in a good way. And so you also have a Democratic governor. So we look forward, keep us posted on how you approach this. I think your Ted tickler deadline is really a good idea. Does anybody else want to jump in on Virginia before we move ahead? Okay, well, thank you.
I do, Harvey.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is Justin LeBlanc from Rockland, California, outside of Sacramento. The proposition I'm open for discussion, if anybody wants to follow up with me on it, is how for that curbside type voting. is there any reason for social distancing safety that we can't have people pick up their ballots without any sort of documentation and only provide documentation when they drop it off to cast it?
There's an idea. A pickup for application form. That's a great
And
idea.
application forms and ballots whenever, the whole
Yeah, they
process
should do that.
90 days out to the day of.
Yeah, well, that's something we should put forward as a proposition, right? Maybe you can do it in Virginia. Maybe the good thing would be if
You can't just pick up a ballot.
Yeah, right,
I mean, you can't do that.
right.
You have to be registered. They
okay,
have to check you off.
you
Ballots
should be able to
are-
pick up an application though.
Yeah,
So
but he said ballot.
applications done
Yeah,
online.
okay, I misspoke. Should be you should be able to pick up, if the state requires an application, if they're not going to mail ballots to all registered voters, or even if they are, you should be able to pick up a registration form. When Sherrod Brown was Secretary of State of Ohio, he had application forms everywhere. I think he actually had them in McDonald's, as a matter of fact. So we should look at that. But he, in one of his Sherrod Brown, by the way, is my choice for president, but that's another story. So,
Hear,
but
hear.
we should look at what Sherrod Brown did when he was Secretary of State of Ohio.
Maybe you
Judson, I
can talk
think you did.
Sherrod Brown into running, Harvey. Maybe you can
what?
talk him into running.
No, I've tried.
A lot of us
So,
like you.
but at any rate, when he was Secretary of State, it was very easy to get registered. And that's a good idea. So we should promote this in Virginia, since you have a special session coming up, maybe it's something you could propose.
Harvey?
Yeah,
Bruce-
real quick.
Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but I know a fair amount about it. That ACLU case, that's a precedent. And any other state that's having a similar problem should, contact, if anybody else here has a state that's having the problem, they should try to get the contact information so that the ACLU can do it in their state. And then the ACLU needs to get off their, and start taking this up.
What decision are you referencing?
The decision about the absentee ballots that they were talking about in Roanoke, where ACLU won a very small victory, but that can be built upon.
What was the victory?
Go back to the lady that was talking before.
Hey,
it was about the absentee ballots.
To get rid of the or dispense with the requirement to have to get a witness signature due to COVID. And that case was brought by the League of Women Voters, and they were represented by the ACLU of Virginia.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
going on in Texas too. So, and it's going to be a big issue in the fall. So we need to get the ACLU on board for more global issues related to this.
Well, getting rid of the signature is a big one. It's unfortunate we couldn't get rid of it in North Carolina, but at least it's not two, and at least it's not a notarization. So those are all good things. Okay, we're gonna get to George.
One quick question.
I do want to. Yes.
Harvey, just addressing the Virginia 10-10 idea. It's a great idea, but if you think it's going to take a month, you're already November 10th, you're past the deadline, and you're not accounting for mail. You should do it October 1st at the very earliest, and ask people to get in as early as allowed to get the absentee ballots, because there's nothing magic about another week or two earlier, but you're hosed if it doesn't come in by election day. So
yeah, and then also don't forget the UCAVA voters. Those are American voters living abroad, and here in Virginia we have an awful lot because it's a heavily military state. We have the largest naval base down in Norfolk. Sorry, San Diego, we beat you. But and also a lot of expats come out of the DC area, live abroad for the Foreign Service. And things like that, the diplomatic corps. So those ballots as well, those, voters abroad need to also
Earlier the better.
request
All right, that
earlier
makes
than,
sense.
than domestic voters.
Okay, very good. Yeah, the earlier the better is a good thumbnail. All right, let's jump ahead. I just saw a video from a helicopter, a news video of the march that's going on right now in Los Angeles. And it's on the George Floyd march. It is enormous. It goes on from at least a mile. There must be 50,000 people in this march today. So we raised the issue. Valia raised it. I hope people are, and Colette in North Carolina, I hope we can make the connection to using, having people getting registered and signing up to vote for election protection at these marches. I mean, this one in LA, it's just mind-boggling. If you Google it, it's one of the biggest marches I've ever seen. And this is what, 2, 3, 4 weeks out. So we have got to find somehow to move at least some of this energy into election protection and make sure that all this focus on policing does not dissipate without helping with protecting the upcoming fall elections. It's really mind-boggling. If you want to, after the call, Google aerial footage of today's march in Los Angeles. It's staggering, and to me, it's like a lost opportunity. Colette last week said that you can register people with the phones. Something's got to be done to convert this enormous outpouring into the election. Also, reporting from Los Angeles, you'll all be glad to know, maybe many of you have heard, that LeBron James has formed an election protection organization. And I used to play for the Lakers, but I've lost touch with LeBron. If any of you can get in touch with LeBron and figure out how to really work with him to get the election protection done the way it needs to be done, that would be great. I mean, I don't have to tell you what a major figure LeBron James is. We'll go to Georgia in a minute. John Breaker, you're still with us?
I just got off the phone call with my attorneys in Florida, what we're planning to do down there shortly.
Are you good for the rest of the call?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's go to Georgia, and I want to ask you, first question, which is on everybody's mind, what was with those machines? The Secretary of State of Georgia spent more than $100 million on these machines. Can you tell us about them? And where else are they?
Well, hey, don't look any farther than California, okay? You guys have gone into the Dominion, and what they're using is what they call the ICX. And I call it the Taco Bell machine. If you go to a Taco Bell, they have a touch screen too that's connected to an inexpensive printer. And it produces a plain piece of paper after you get done voting that you carry over to a digital scanner. What they need to do is get rid of those ICX machines, okay? They had terrible problems with them. You have to touch the screen, or virus get putting out, and just go with hand-marked paper ballots and digitally scan them, because they have what they call a hybrid. You use the touch screen ICX with a cheap printer. It prints up not a ballot, it prints up a summary result sheet that has a really big, huge QR code, okay? And then below there is your results. And it just takes too long. The employees aren't trained, and they had a lot of software problems, which is it didn't read all of the votes because the calibration was wrong, and that's what they're finding. And what that means is that on the hand-marked paper ballots that they were to have by vote by mail, okay, when you fill in the bubble, some people use the check mark, and the calibration works this way: what percentage of the bubble needs to be filled in before you can count it as a vote? And now that they know that exists on what vote by mail they did have, because those were digitally scanned, is that they can look at it and see voter intent to correct that problem. And that's the good thing about having digital, of course, is having the original ballot and that they protect each other. So it was a disaster. And, you know, the good person to have on the show who are on this group is Marilyn Marks, and have her come in. She'll give you a detail because that's turf that she's doing, and she's doing a wonderful job. Marilyn Marks,
I know,
with governments.
I know Steve Rosenfeld knows a lot about it. We're going to have him on. But
Yes.
John, are you saying that they spent $105 million on machines that could be replaced with a pencil?
No, about 80 million of it could have been replaced with a pencil, okay? Because it works out that basically 7 out of every $10 in Georgia, or approximately around there, is spent on replacing an ink pen. Crazy, huh?
No, well,
And
if
paper ballots, you just keep passing them out, people keep voting.
If the guy who's selling the machines was formerly the chief of staff for the guy who's now governor, then we know what's going on here. So are there other places around the country
Harvey
are going to encounter these insane machines?
Harvey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Greg Tabor, Riverside County. John, I've been trying to get a hold of you for about a week now. I'm going to send you my phone number and email information. Riverside County, yeah, I've been learning about the Dominion machines, and I've been doing Records Act requests for the primary, the March 3rd primary. I'm about to do another one, and I want to do it asking for these ballot images. So I'd like to communicate with you directly.
You bet.
Okay, I'll send you my...
And also, Ray Lutz is very much the leader of the ballot image work in California, and he's just doing an outstanding job. And he's
So
on
John,
the call too.
What other states are we going to encounter these Dominion machines?
Well, it's just not the Dominion, it's the ES&S too, and you're going to find it mostly, believe it or not, in Republican-controlled territory, because maybe by buying all this stuff, what they're really doing is frustrating voters. They're also suppressing. They're also making it easy if they had to, because there is no voter intent on these machine-marked ballots, making them very easily to switch out. And, you know, you got these machines all over the country, and that's where, you know, vote by mail really takes them out of the game, because they can't mail a ballot marking device, even though the head of Mecklenburg County, okay, he told me he would rather mail out a DRE than a ballot. He's so anti. And there's a lot of that going on. Shelby County, hopefully this week we'll know what's going there. We're in a big fight in Shelby. This is the same fight that we had in North Carolina, and we did pretty good. We got quite a few counties to switch to hand-marked paper ballot. Not all, but you know, you pick the fights and you go in and you try to do the best you can with what resources you have. But being on the front line and fighting, and you know, I will talk to Greg, because that's where the battle's being fought, and that we need people to interact with these people.
Steve Rosenfeld, you wanted to jump in here? Steve Rosenfeld?
Yeah, okay, we got to be a little clearer here. I spoke with a woman who was the coordinator for the Lawyers Committee's hotline in Georgia this morning, because she is a Board of Election commissioner in one of the counties that has that issue with the Dominion scanners. And what she said was, it was not what was printed on the ballot summary cards that was the problem. It was the way the scanners were reading poorly marked ovals. And that's where, when you were saying before, Harvey, where, like, you know, it didn't pick up above a certain gradient of being filled in, and yet it was highlighted in a different way and they had to examine it. So let's just be really clear here. Like, if we're talking about something that's misprinted on a ballot summary card, which comes out of a BMD, a ballot marking device, that's one thing. If it's a scanner reading a hand-marked paper absentee ballot, that's another. That's what we're talking about in Georgia. And tomorrow, one of our friends, activist friends, Garland Favorito, his group is going to be issuing, a press release statement basically noting that there's no auditing going on with the current Georgia election, which, by the way, is not uncommon with some of these other primaries. If you want to talk about where there are problems with the ballot marking device, which prints the card, which so there is no post-election day adjudication around intent, you have to go to South Carolina, where I heard in one county, the contractor lent the county an extra machine, ballot marking device combined with a printer, and to print and help them, and it was printing the wrong barcode, which is the ballot style, on the top, so that when the things were filled in below, it was bringing up the wrong. So, and that was caught. They caught that. They pulled it out of service. But so we're talking about things here where these are, we don't know how these scale. We don't know their magnitudes. And we could just have to, we'll just leave it right there. So we're talking about what's so hard about this is these are different systems, different digital devices, performing differently at different points along the arc before the votes as they're registered and counted. So back to you, but I'm just trying to be clear here. That's what I'm trying to do.
So basically, you have a situation in Georgia where people went to the polls, they encountered a digital marking machine which could transmit the virus because it's touched by hands, right? The marking machine produces a card, and then the card is supposed to go into a digital scanner.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how it works. And the way that they call it a paper ballot system, this is the vendors, is that a piece of paper is produced. And what upsets people like Chris Sauter and John Brakey, and I've written about this myself, is that when that process is automated, which is the filling in of the ovals, you do not have a post-election day process where a canvassing board can act as a jury to determine voter intent. Now, what happened with the absentee ballots, which came in through an entirely different pathway, but were also, then they merged with the scanning stage. They were misread by those scanners. And what Garland Favorito's point is number one, there is no audit process. It's not public. And if we're not for some activists who did some good work, it may not even have been discovered. But nobody knows the scale of this. Nobody. So I just want to point out, we're seeing stories out there by some of our progressive friends, and the tone is the sky is falling. And you know what? There's so much stuff here that we're talked about today, and we don't know the relative impact of all of these things. And we got to be really careful that we don't cry wolf before we know the full picture, because we have to try to fix this stuff, and no one will pay attention to us if we get it wrong. So I don't know. Let me get off that soapbox. But we don't know. This is what we know, but it's not a complete picture. Is that clear?
Well, but the picture, and Mark Carlin, you're next. I just want to ask John Brakey, how many other states do you go in? You're confronted with a ballot marking device. A piece of paper comes out. It then goes into another machine to be read, and then there's no audit. Is that what we're looking at, state by state by state?
And in a lot of states, yes, that's what you're looking at, and it is a bad situation. You're looking at the screen right now, the machine that just happened in South Carolina. You see the barcode on the top, and then you see the result summary. Well, it doesn't read the summary. It reads what that barcode. And what this is really big, what Steve just talked about, is that apparently it would give the right names, but when you look at the barcode, it wasn't the right. It's supposed to be an X, Y coordinates, and they should be both the same. But it's being investigated. We don't know the exact thing on that yet, but it's a real problem.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
Circle K, you could buy a gallon of milk for $4.99 with the same barcode, and at the Surprise food store, it's $3.99. What do you want it to be? Okay, this is a terrible situation, and that's why vote by mail for this because of all of this may not be a bad thing, because I can see voter intent on that ballot, but I don't see none on this damn thing.
It was
Okay.
it was a computer.
Mark Carlin, you had a question? Mark Carlin from BuzzFlash.
About Georgia, I've read a lot about the details of the machines, which I understand were not pre-tested in any other election before the primary. But isn't this a larger issue in Georgia, that you basically have an incestuous political governor and his mini-me Secretary of State, with the former chief of staff getting the Dominion contract to put into what was supposed to be an improvement of the old Georgia voting machines, which were condemned as antiquated. And Greg Pallas has said that, he strongly believes this is willful chaos on the part of Kemp and the Secretary of State. So isn't much of this a political issue without even getting into details of all the flaws in the Dominion?
It's true. Oh, absolutely. But, the details are critical, because we got to go state by state and figure out what's going on elsewhere. I heard Stacey Abrams today on The View. She just ripped them apart. Nancy Pelosi has finally come out and said that the chaos in Georgia was by design. So at least we're starting to be heard on this. But you're absolutely right, Mark. And it is. But we need to know the details. I mean, and this detail is critical, because if John and the other people who focus on machines, and Steve go into other states and see Dominion machines, and then printing out these insane devices, these insane pieces of paper here with barcodes on them, and then we know what's going to happen in the other states as well. Mimi, you had a hand. Mimi Kennedy.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it is a political issue, Mark, to answer your question, but all political issues need to be ultimately settled by the voters at the ballot box. So that's our catch-22.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're trying to face this particular election that we're headed towards as a way where the voters can protect themselves against the vulnerabilities that we know are there now. And the one that I wanted to address, because I think it was misinterpreted what Steve said, and I just want to know, there are 2 barcodes on BMD ballots. The first is when they give you the ballot and it's blank and you stick it in the machine. The first barcode tells the machine to pull up your precinct ballot with your Congress, John Ossoff, instead of whoever is running in the next congressional district. Right. You've got to have the correct that's the first barcode. Then you vote, and most voters won't know if that's the wrong barcode. They may just vote somebody else's ballot. Who cares? But you lose those votes from your voters. And the second barcode is what the machine prints on it, and it embeds all the votes that you've done. It comes out of the machine now with that first barcode still on the top, but its usefulness for the moment is over. And the second barcode has your votes embedded in it, and that is the usefulness for the tabulator. The first barcode may be useful for the tabulator too, if the tabulator has to read, I am now on precinct number 2000 ballot instead of precinct number 800 ballot. But I just wanted you to know there's 2 barcodes on a BMD ballot. One is to tell the BMD what kind of choices to give the voter for his residence or her residence. The second is printed on after the voter is finished, and that is used by the tabulator. But an audit will require human eyes on the text.
Harvey, I just...
Steve, I'll get you, Justin and then Steve, okay?
Yeah.
This is a system designed to fail. I mean, this can't work. It's a crazy system. Steve, go ahead, then Justin.
Let me, okay, so let me just talk to Mark here for a second, because this is really important. And this is a big thing that has to do with all of our messaging. It has to do with what I look to report on and what we should look at for others. Mark, Greg Palast is wrong about voter purges affecting what happened in Georgia last week. Let me just say it flat out. He's fucking wrong, and it's an embarrassment. And I spent hours on the phone this morning calling people who were running the election protection hotlines all throughout Georgia, and our activist friends in Georgia, and they said flat out, purges were not the problem that caused these bottlenecks. And if we just keep repeating stories from the past that have made us famous as journalists, but they don't apply to the facts on the ground right now, we're in trouble. And I'm sorry to say this, but you know what? What happened in Georgia last week was not about purges and provisional ballots. It was an entirely different set of systems that were debuting, and they were failing at local levels and at statewide levels, and it was administrative, and it was bureaucratic, and it was technical, and it was political. And people are trying to pick up the pieces, and the last people in line who are getting help are the voters. So I'm just saying this. I mean, you talk about voter purges. I'm just saying, 6.9 million people were sent ballot applications. 300,000 people were called inactive voters and didn't get those applications. I talked to activists on the phone today who said that they made hundreds of thousands of calls to those inactive voters. How is that? That's not purging. That's something else that's going on that's not getting them their ballots. So let's just be really clear here. I mean, we got to be really careful here, because if we cry wolf and some of our famous friends get all the headlines and suck all the air out of this, and we're pointing to stuff that's not really the problem, then our credibility is shot. And it's really easy to say the sky is falling, because that's easy to believe. People want to believe that stuff. And what I'm hearing is that all these nickel and dime mistakes are going to become the founts of misinformation and disinformation in the fall. So we got to be really careful about this stuff.
Okay. Justin LeBlanc. Justin, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for clarifying these things. The threats to our system have indeed morphed, but I think the core really ends up being exactly the same, and that is money in politics. In particular, a thread that has run throughout all of these discussions are related to contractors and contractor fraud, grift, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And so the long story short is, that's a system that you end up getting into the weeds on. How do you end up telling people what they need to do, I think is what folks like Mimi Kennedy are bringing up. Because we can't really change the machine behind the scenes, except maybe like John and Mr. Sauter are doing through the courts. We can tell the voters what they can do. And am I still here, or did you lose me?
No, but the point is that we're focused here on the mechanics of the election and making sure that that people get a chance to vote, and that their votes get in and they're counted, and those are the issues here. You're right about the money in politics, but our focus on these calls, there's a lot of other things we could bring up, but our focus on these calls is the mechanics of the voting and making sure that people are registered, that they get a ballot, that the ballot goes in, that it's protected and it's counted. And we have lost elections, and we've seen presidencies changed on the basis of the perversion of that simple system. And that's why we have a trifecta here: voter registration, vote by mail, and counting the ballots. And that's what we got to deal with here. Jen Carrius.
Sorry, I dropped out. My audio has been giving me tremendous troubles.
Okay.
And so thank you specifically to Mimi on that front, because it is information to the voters that's the essential thing. And some folks here in this forum have suggested that we get together a spreadsheet and start contacting individually some of the protests participants, if not organizers, that we know, in addition to Sherrod Brown reaching out to LeBron James to see what he can organize in all of that.
Okay.
Because
All right,
really it does take the people going down to the elections offices to ask for the things that we need, not just to hope it'll come together in November.
Well, yes, and we have to discuss this thoroughly. That's the purpose of these calls, so we know the details of what we're dealing with, because the details are what kills us. And Bob Fitrakis and I, and with Steve, saw what happened in Ohio 2004. It was not glamorous, and it was not about money and politics. It was about the specifics of how they, stole the election. And then the Democrat, John Kerry, said nothing. Jen Carius, Jen, did you want to jump in here?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to share what I'm doing. I shared a spreadsheet. If you want to be on it, you can just give me your email in the chat box, or I'll leave mine. And basically what I'm doing, I have an outreach organization, a nonprofit 501c3, but I'm also doing interviews, 10 questions for elections officials about voter access. And so if you want information, I could add something to some of my question set if it's in a particular state. So in this spreadsheet, I have every state that I'm working in or will be working in, and if it describes my project, and if everyone wants to use it, you could find people in your state that you want to work or doing the type of work that you're doing if you want to join on. So that's what I made, and it's called the the 2020 voter protection activity spreadsheet. And
okay, if you'll post your contacts.
I can add you in.
Post your contacts in the chat box here, if you will.
Okay, I'm posting the Google Drive itself, but I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Justin, you had a hand up? Justin LeBlanc? I had just spoken. Oh, you had just spoken. Okay, good. We're down. We still have 13 minutes. I did want to talk. Is anyone else waiting in line to speak up here?
If I could just 1 minute, okay?
Oh, yes, John.
That,
Let's see this. Wait. Wow, look at, that's a great cartoon.
Well, it is, and that's what I want to talk about is that, I've been now in 18 states the last 4 years, and what I've learned is that why does a bank robber rob a bank? Because that's where the money is. Why do they rob communities of color? Because that's where the votes are. And I find that a lot of these election boards are scandalous of what's going on there because people are not there getting people informed. This cartoon, if you can read it, says, has a drinking fountain. One is an electrified cool. The other one says black. And it's just a simple fountain. Down below is a voting machine. And where it says black, it is a machine that destroys your vote. And that's what it, and I'm saying if I had to write a report, which we will do, because we filed for a congressional hearing, okay, about this subject matter of what's going on with particularly one vendor, ES&S. Yes, there's concerns with the others. This is a huge problem. We got VPN out there, virtual private network that is dangerous, and all that kind of stuff. But being engaged and getting in the battle is the key. And Michigan's another state we'll be doing next. I took enough time. Thank you.
Well, the irony is that it appears from, I've been reading a lot about this, it appears that vote by mail tends to be used more by Republicans than Democrats.
This is Mark.
Yes.
That is true. In fact, I was just reading an article about the 2016 vote in Florida, and Hillary Clinton clobbered, well, that's too strong of a word, beat Trump by many thousands of votes in Florida in the in-person voting, but in the mail-in voting. And there was just a group of anti-lockdown Trump followers who were burning up the affidavits that had been sent out by the Secretary of State of Michigan for absentee ballots. So, some Republicans are questioning, is he shooting himself in the foot? Because actually absentee ballots for, older Trump voters would be more helpful to him. So it's an interesting dilemma.
But we are advocating vote by mail. Well, many
Yes.
people support vote by mail because it gives a paper ballot, unlike the digital marking devices, and it's auditable, and people can do it without risking their lives at the polls.
Well, I think that's really important. The coverage of Georgia this time, from all the articles I read, there's nary a mention of the black voter turnout. I think for this primary was 3 times the black vote turnout for the midterm election, which is extraordinary. And we all read about people waiting 4.5 hours and so forth. So I think that's a testament to the uprising against Trump, but I don't know if that's replicable in every state.
I don't know
But
either.
we do, on my point, what I was going to say is in the articles, again, no one mentioned that all this was happening amidst these voters being forced basically to go and vote in person. And in the Wisconsin primary, there was a recognition of that because of the court cases and then the subsequent announcement of, I believe, 70 to 80 infections from that vote. But there was no mention of coronavirus in this Georgia primary.
On. Jesus fucking Christ, get on with it.
What's that? Are we being hacked here? Okay. Okay, Mark, thank you. Real quickly, Ray Lutz, you have a call tomorrow on the details of voting machines. Do you want to tell us real quick and post the link?
Right. Well, we've been having, this is about our 20th call talking about the auditing, especially. Citizens Oversight has been really focused on learning how to audit elections. So I think it's something that we need to include in the list here a little bit more. But we have, really discovered what to look at, when to look at it, what to ask for, and it's fairly easy for one person to have a huge impact in, say, a whole state or several states. So that's one thing. We have a ballot image auditing tool that's being developed, and that's something we're trying to sort of train people on how to use that. But I want to mention something here I just was learning about. Now, the volunteer voting systems guidelines is open for comment right now, and it closes a week from tomorrow. Comment period is now open. And they have something that they're pushing for now, which is called remote BMD voting. And apparently that's where you use your computer, go to a website, vote, and then click print. And it would then print out a piece of paper, where I guess with a QR code on it, and your ballot options, and then you mail it in. So this is something that they've been just adding quickly into this, but I want to let everybody know that the volunteer.
Who is they? What states?
Well, the volunteer voting system guidelines is done by the Election Assistance Commission. It's federal, and it's the guidelines used to approve the voting systems. And these type of voting systems will not need any approval by their guidelines. So this is going to be, I think, a mad rush to use this potentially in this upcoming election.
Okay, so you and when is your meeting? Will you put in the chat box how to
Yeah.
Your meeting is tomorrow. What time?
Yeah, it's at noon Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern, and
all right, and you'll put the link in the chat room.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost at the end. I'm going to call it Mimi in a second. I do want to apologize again for the flood of emails. It was not our fault. Well, I guess it was, but someone new to the call who is not on the call today jumped in and sent out the wrong meeting time. So we had to correct that. On Wednesday, we will have a webinar. If you want to sign up, we'll be sending out a flyer. That's the only thing we'll send. Next Monday, we will not have a participatory call. I'm going to replay and re-push the webinar that we're going to do on Wednesday. The purpose of the webinar, and Mimi will be on with us, Andrea Miller, John Brakey, Steve, Bob, is to have a 1-hour digestible overview of the voting system as a whole, including the trifecta of voter registration, vote by mail, and counting the ballots, so that it will be a resource for people who want to get an overview and have it visual. We will probably write something up in conjunction with that, spread it out. I'm really glad Alan Minsky was on from PDA, and we will spread that far and wide. But the visual run, and Bob Petrakis, you'll be on with us. The visual run is going to happen Wednesday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, Mimi, you wanted to? Is there any question about that?
I have a question about what Ray Lutz said. Did he say we have 1 week to comment on this proposal by the EAC? And should we all be writing or calling in and saying what a terrible idea it is?
Yeah, well, it may not be a bad idea, but there is a lot of bad stuff in it. I'll tell you, we're really disappointed in the quality of this document. It's such a mess. I think this whole department has been just undercut by the administration to the point where they can't do much of anything. So we're doing our best. We've had a committee through the State Audit Working Group. That, by the way, meets on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Let me know. I put my email on the list if you want to join that one. Those are election experts that have really been involved in looking over this volunteer voting system guidelines.
Why would we want anything with the barcodes?
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, these are good comments. I think as many people as possible should comment about what you think should be approved or not approved. If they do put in barcodes, they should be easy to interpret so that we can tell what the hell is in them. They have them set up right now so that it takes really much a PhD to figure them out. And so you really don't know what's in them. What you see on the page printed is not necessarily that you can't figure out if that's what's in the barcode. So this is the problem. So yeah, all of these sort of comments that you have, we're trying to push for more vote by mail capability in these voter guidelines. But maybe I will send out maybe to the list here links to the draft document so people can look at it. And then
put it up there.
And then maybe at the next meeting, we'll still have time at the next week. Maybe we can go over it because I think it's a great opportunity to get our foot in the door on the official, you know, motion that's going in process here for these voting machines.
I thought you said there was just 1 week for voter input left.
It's been open for 90 days.
My mistake.
Again, go on Ray's call tomorrow. Bob Petrakis, do you have anything to throw in real quick from Ohio before I go to Mimi? Ohio has been an utter catastrophe. Bob, is there anything new to report from Ohio?
No, we're just waiting for the final version of the bill, which doesn't look that good at this time.
Okay.
So that's and also the Secretary of State's trying to figure out whether he can get around the state legislature. So as soon as we see the final bill, we'll know.
Okay, you'll put it up. We have a minute, and so Mimi, you're up. You want to jump in here on registration?
Yeah, well, I'm just, the article that is going to come out talks about checking your registration after August 5th. That is a 90-day firm date after which no purging can be done, but registration, new registration can be done, and there is a deadline for that that varies by state. But we're going to put out this calendar, and August is check your registration month. Take a screenshot, check everybody's, take a screenshot, update. September's order your ballot month. October is expect your ballot to come month and complain if it doesn't, and vote it and mail it in, or keep it with you. And no matter what the laws are, if you want to vote in person, you should really take that ballot if you have it with you, because it might be the only way you can prove you haven't voted and avoid a provisional vote. Now, there are variations that I'm hearing from lots of different people. Oh, that's not true in our state. You can do this, you can do that. And then I go and check, and they've given me wrong information, or maybe they've given me right information, and I've had to put caveats in the article. But basically, what we're seeing is the same old, only landowners can vote. There are reasons why ballots are tracked, why ballot printing, every ballot is stamped, because they don't want ballots flying around everywhere. If they send you one or if they give you one, they've got to know it comes back. They're worried about it. These laws have developed over 100 years to make sure that things are trackable, and they turn out to be voter suppressive when voters have no idea. And until I was a poll worker, I had no idea about any of this stuff. Now I've served on a committee at the Register. I have a lot of idea, and I know that the only way to get rid of a dictator by peaceful means is to have your vote counted as cast. And I see that we need to tell voters about this vote by mail stuff, and to check and tell the activists to do it, because they'll do it for the people who've never heard of us and don't know there's anything except voting on November 3rd. So that's what I have to say. And we're going to get an article and start the conversation about this long calendar. And I hope we can all do our pieces around that. Thanks.
And I just want to say that I saw the calendar, and I said that we should call it every day is election day, because it's fine and dandy right now for November, but they call elections all the time, and they're important elections, and people should maybe check their registration once a month, like when they pay their mortgage, and just automatically check and make sure you're registered, because propositions come up that affect your life. All kinds of things come up, special elections, and everybody should be prepared to vote on a dime. You should be prepared to vote at any time. You shouldn't just be prepared to vote.
With that, I'm going to reiterate, we will have our Zoom town hall webinar on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon Pacific. Next week, we will not convene this particular session, but in 2 weeks from today, we will rerun the webinar in this time slot. And 2 weeks, I'm glad to announce that the meeting will be convened by LeBron James. So everybody wear your jersey. Thank you, Paul, for running another great meeting. Very proud of this group, and we'll reconvene in 2 weeks, but join us on Wednesday for the webinar, okay? And this will be recorded and available along with the other ones. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
No more stolen elections.
All right. Oh.
Oops.